currently living in Halifax, Nova Scotia, but originally from Regina, Saskatchewan, just outside of the city.
What instilled the desire, or who inspired you to become a motorcycle rider?
So my whole family rides. So when I was younger, my dad took my sister and I out and just kind of stuck us on a dirt bike and said, "This is how you do it," and then let us try. And we fell a lot the first few times, and then we eventually got the hang of it, and we've been riding like ever since, just around the farm. My aunt, my uncle, my cousins, they all do. My grandpa, I think, was the original. He restores old motorcycles, so I've just been around it for a very long time. He did give me a little bit of a very, very short lesson about how a manual transmission works, because I had no idea. I was so young. So the whole clutch is here, this is how you shift, but that was about it. I learned a lot through just doing it and repetition, and I find that that's the best way to do it, because at that point you learn what the different noises mean in your bike. And so yeah, hours and hours of riding is what I use to figure out how to ride better.
So this was all probably prior to you actually getting your driver's license?
Yeah, I was, this was when I was young, probably 10 and up, I guess. We started on mini bikes and then we moved up to actual dirt bikes.
So once you decided that you wanted to get out on the street and do some riding, did anybody question your judgment on this?
My friends didn't quite get it. They often wondered, like, why would you want to do that? We just got our car licenses. Why do you want to go move on to get another license? Not many people questioned it, saying that I shouldn't do it, but I had a lot of whys and a lot of concern, like, be careful from everybody, but not many people told me I shouldn't do it.
So did some of that stem from you being a lady?
I think so, because after my cousins, my male cousin who decided to ride, he didn't really get that from everybody. They just kind of said, "Oh, cool, you're going to ride a motorcycle." But my sister and I got it a lot of people being quite worried about our safety. I mean, with good intentions, but we got it a little more than I think a male counterpart would have.
So did you ever take the motorcycle training course?
I did. Mostly because my mom told me I had to. I'm very, very glad I did, but I wasn't chomping at the bit to do it myself. But my mom said if I was going to ride, I had to take the motorcycle safety course, so I did. I guess around the time I was 18. The first 30 seconds I was there, I had that bad attitude of, "Oh, I already know this. Why are we doing this?" when we were learning how to balance the bike. But shortly, like a few minutes in, I realized, oh, I know how to do these things one way, but that's not necessarily the right way. So I learned early on that I did have some bad habits just from riding around the farm, and I learned a lot immediately.
A mix between men, women, different ages, old people, young people?
Yep, there were quite a mix of people there, but I'm pretty sure I was one of the youngest people there.
Okay, and male versus female?
Definitely a couple females, because the first practice, or first thing that we were supposed to do was with partners, and I remember I had a female partner, so there must have been at least a few.
Actually, coming into the course, what did you feel you needed to know prior to coming to the course?
I had never been on a bigger bike than my dirt bike, so I remember mentally preparing myself for I was also terrified to be on anything bigger than my dirt bike, because that's what I was used to, and I wasn't used to the motorcycles that people buy to ride on the street. So I remember I needed to learn if those are any different than my dirt bike, like the controls or anything. And I didn't know at the time, but really quickly I learned I was really bad at slow speed, because that wasn't something that I was doing.
You mentioned that you had an attitude coming in saying that I know it all. did you feel a little bit more confident actually once you started riding and getting the feeling and understanding what was expected of you at the course?
I did, but I feel like I came in with too much confidence. And then once I realized I wasn't going to be the superstar of the show because there were things that I had to learn, I got a little less confident. But then as we started going, I realized that I did have a pretty decent foundation. And as long as I was willing to listen to the instructors and do what they told me to, as opposed to what I wanted to do, then I was going to do better in the class.
So a little bit of anxiety coming in also?
Yeah, definitely. Just trying new things and I don't know, being on something that can be potentially dangerous if you're not being careful. I really enjoyed my time with the course. It was trying to think, I think it was all male instructors at the time, or at least the weekend that I took the course, which I was totally fine with. And they did a great job of correcting in a positive way things that I was doing. So I didn't feel very anxious or intimidated or anything.
Okay. What about the rest of the class? Yeah, can you remember what they kind of felt? The other females?
Yeah, I was gonna say all in all, I feel like most people were pretty okay. I know there was a couple ladies that were just a little more anxious and maybe a little more intimidated by the all male instructors, but that didn't last very long. That was mostly just like first day jitters, I think. And then once we got going, I mean, the instructors are really personable too. So by the end of it, everybody's having a lot of fun, making jokes. So that initial anxiety was over quite quickly.
Until we told you probably that we were going to do an evaluation at the end, or a test as people always call it, which probably made you nervous again.
Oh, that's always the scariest part. I knew going into it that there was going to be some kind of evaluation, but even then, when you know about it beforehand, as soon as someone mentions test, it just sends your heart rate right up. I passed. I did really well, actually, but I think that's just because I was hyper focused on what I was supposed to be doing.
So Haley, before training, did you know what style of bike you would like to ride?
I have been around Harleys for a lot of my life, so I felt like I had to ride a Harley. My first bike was actually a Sportster that my dad helped work on, and I loved it. I just absolutely loved it. It was the most perfect bike. Um, so yeah, I just kind of fell into that one. I didn't do a whole lot of research um, before I bought that bike. Had I done a little bit of research, I might have got something a little different, but I was very happy with it.
So more of the cruiser style of bike is what you're talking about.
Yeah, definitely.
So I'm answering some of the questions in case people didn't know what a Sportster was.
Right. Yeah.
A Harley Sportster. So
Mhm.
yes, more of a cruiser style of bike. Knowing what you know now, would you choose a different style of bike? Because the styles obviously have changed lots. There's the big touring bikes. Adventure touring is really big. Back in my day, it was called dual sport. Now they're bigger engines and stuff, so they're adventure touring bikes, they're sport bikes, scooters, all those kind of things. So would you change what you're riding at all?
I think I would, only because all the bikes that I was looking at were more for and cruising and touring for long distances, and that wasn't really what I was using it for. I was using it to go back and forth to school and work and more city riding. So after that Sportster, I actually bought a Harley Davidson V-Rod, which is mainly just meant to go fast in a straight line. So it wasn't ideal for city riding. So knowing what I know now, I would probably go with more of a dual sport or an adventure bike or something that's a little more fun to ride around the city. Definitely not a giant cruising bike, though. If I had tried to get on an adventure bike, which are quite tall, that would have been pretty intimidating. So it was nice and comfy and low to the ground. So it was really good in that aspect. It didn't scare me to get on it and start moving, where I think a taller bike might have been scary to just balance on.
So what about gear? when you first started riding, what sort of gear did you wear? What was the first few days?
First few days, although the rules that are in place now for gear were not in place when I got my license, I did, again, because of my mom, I was decked out in everything that I was supposed to have. So gloves, jacket, high boots, denims. I didn't go chap route or anything, but I did have all the stuff that I was supposed to have on. But as I got going, and again, got maybe a little too confident in my riding skills, I shed a lot of that gear, and I ended up riding, like when it was really hot in the summer, I wouldn't have all the stuff you necessarily should have on. But now I've gone back the other way, and I'm back to wearing all the proper gear I should have. I also started in a beanie helmet, just because a beanie meaning the really teeny ones that sit on your head. Knowing what I know now, I would never do that again because it really didn't protect much of me at all. And again, being on the highway, everything got in my eyes all the time. So I started out okay, then I moved on to not so much gear. Now I'm back to wearing all the gear I'm supposed to. So I
You were
was
keener.
really excited after my training to start riding everywhere. So I think I rode on that Sportster anywhere that I could ride a bike. If the weather was horrendous, I would go everywhere on it. That the only way I was going to get used to it and make it less intimidating is if I kept doing it. So what I would do is stay off of any hills for the first little bit, or actually the first, it's an embarrassing story, but I was on the way to write my my ridden test, I guess, and on the underpass, I stalled my bike on the way to write my test, which I thought was an awful omen, and I thought, oh goodness, I'm never going to pass this test. But so I would avoid hills and really dense areas for the first little bit, just till I got used to riding in traffic, and then I would start going downtown to the one-ways and just ease myself into it because I was pretty nervous.